Parents used my husband's death to help golden child sister steal our company, then demanded more. Have you ever felt that sinking feeling in your gut, that sense of dread that tells you something is terribly wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That's how I felt in the weeks after my husband, Liam, died. It wasn't just the grief, though that was a crushing weight, a constant ache in my chest that made it hard to breathe, to think, to function. It was something more. Something lurking in the shadows, whispering insidious doubts, poisoning the already toxic air around me. And it all centered around my family, my own family. The people who were supposed to be my support system, my safe harbor in the storm, were the ones tearing me apart. Liam's death had been sudden, unexpected. A heart attack, they said. A massive coronary event that stole him away in the blink of an eye. 1 minute he was there, vibrant and full of life, planning our annual summer trip to the lake with our daughter, Olivia, a trip we'd been taking every year since she was born, a tradition he cherished, and the next, he was gone. Just like that. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. We'd built our dream together, a small but thriving bakery called Sweet Surrender, nestled in the heart of our town, a place filled with the aroma of warm bread and cinnamon rolls, a place that held our hopes, our dreams, our love. And now I was left to pick up the pieces, alone. Or so I thought. The first sign of trouble, the first crack in the already fragile facade of my life, came in the form of my younger sister, Clara. Clara, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes, the one who always got what she wanted, no matter the cost. She'd always been different, entitled, self-centered, spoiled. While I was working alongside Liam, building our business from the ground up, sacrificing weekends and holidays, pouring our heart and soul into every loaf of bread, every perfectly frosted cupcake, Clara was flitting from one failed venture to another, always with our parents' financial and emotional safety net firmly in place. She dabbled in fashion design, convinced she was the next Coco Chanel, then photography, certain she'd be the next Annie Leibovitz, then influencing, whatever that meant, posting endless selfies on Instagram and claiming to be a lifestyle guru. And now, she was suddenly interested in the bakery. Sarah, honey, I've been thinking, my mother, Patricia, said a week after the funeral, her voice dripping with that familiar, condescending concern, the kind that always made my skin crawl. We were sitting in my kitchen, the remnants of a sympathy casserole, one of dozens that had been delivered by well-meaning neighbors, growing cold on the table. Olivia was upstairs, supposedly doing her homework, but I could hear the faint sounds of her favorite cartoon playing on her iPad. You can't possibly manage Sweet Surrender on your own. You're grieving, you have Olivia to take care of. It's too much for one person. You need help. I appreciate your concern, Mom, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety that was tightening in my stomach. But I'm not alone. We have a great team, Mark, Emily, Susan. They've been amazing. And I've been running the bakery with Liam for years. I know what I'm doing. Yes, dear, but Liam was. Well, Liam was Liam, she said, as if his mere existence explained everything, as if his absence somehow invalidated all my years of experience, all my hard work. Clara has offered to help. She's always had a head for business, you know. A head for business? Clara? The woman who thought an Instagram following constituted a career? The woman who couldn't keep a plant alive, let alone a business? My stomach churned, a bitter taste rising in my throat. I wanted to scream, to shout, to tell her exactly what I thought of Clara's head for business, but I bit my tongue. I knew it wouldn't do any good. My parents had always been blind to Clara's flaws, deaf to any criticism of their precious little girl. I don't think that's necessary, Mom, I said, forcing a smile, trying to project an image of calm control that I definitely didn't feel. We're doing fine. Really? But my parents were insistent. They wore me down with their constant calls, their veiled criticisms, their not so subtle hints that I was incapable, incompetent, that I was failing Liam by not accepting Clara's generous offer. They painted me as the stubborn, ungrateful daughter, while Clara was the selfless angel, swooping in to save the day. The guilt trips were relentless, expertly crafted to exploit my grief and vulnerability. Finally, against my better judgment, against every instinct screaming at me to run, to protect what was left of Liam's legacy, I agreed to let Clara help out at the bakery. Clara's arrival was like a hurricane hitting a sandcastle. She swept in, all bright smiles and breezy confidence, immediately making changes, disrupting the carefully crafted order that Liam and I had established over years of hard work. She rearranged the displays, replacing our classic, rustic aesthetic with garish, over-the-top decorations that clashed with the bakery's cozy atmosphere. She criticized the recipes, claiming they were too old-fashioned, too boring, not Instagrammable enough. "We need to modernize, Sarah," she'd say, waving her perfectly manicured hand dismissively, her long, acrylic nails clicking against the glass display cases. "Your branding is so dated. We need to appeal to a younger, hipper demographic." "Dated?" I'd reply, my voice tight, my jaw clenched. "Liam and I built this brand together. It's classic, not dated. Our customers love it." But Clara would just roll her eyes, her perfectly shaped eyebrows arching in disdain, and continue her relentless campaign of improvement. She started ordering expensive, organic ingredients without consulting me, claiming it would attract a higher-end clientele, ingredients like Himalayan pink salt, artisanal honey from a remote village in Nepal, and edible flowers that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She changed the menu, replacing our time-tested favorites, the cinnamon rolls that customers lined up for every Saturday morning, the apple pies that reminded people of their grandmother's kitchens, with trendy, overpriced items that nobody ordered, gluten-free, vegan, matcha-infused croissants, charcoal-activated sourdough bread, and deconstructed avocado toast that looked more like a science experiment than a breakfast item. She even started flirting with our delivery driver, Mark, a sweet, slightly awkward guy who'd been with us for years, a loyal and reliable employee who was practically part of the family. She'd bat her eyelashes, twirl her hair, and giggle at his corny jokes, making him visibly uncomfortable. I saw the way he looked at her, a mixture of confusion and annoyance, and I wanted to tell her to stop, to leave him alone, but I knew it would only make things worse. The worst part was, my parents sided with her on everything. They were completely enamored with her brilliant ideas and modern sensibility. "Clara has such a good eye for these things, Sarah," my father, Richard, would say, beaming with pride. "She's a natural businesswoman. You should listen to her. She's going to take Sweet Surrender to the next level." "But Dad, she's driving away our customers," I'd protest, my voice laced with desperation. "Our regulars don't want gluten-free, vegan, matcha-infused croissants. They want our classic cinnamon rolls and apple pies. They want the things that Liam and I created, the things that made Sweet Surrender special." "Don't be so resistant to change, Sarah," my mother would chime in, her voice sharp and dismissive. "You're too stuck in the past. Clara is just trying to help you. She's thinking about the future of the bakery, about Olivia's future." I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I the only one who saw what was happening? Was I the only one who cared about preserving Liam's legacy, about protecting the business we'd built together, about honoring the memory of the man I loved? Was I the only one who saw Clara for who she really was, a manipulative, self-centered opportunist, using my grief and my vulnerability to further her own agenda? One evening, after a particularly disastrous day at the bakery, a day filled with customer complaints, wasted ingredients, and a screaming match with Clara that left me shaking with rage and frustration, I found myself confiding in old Mrs. Henderson, a regular customer who'd been coming to Sweet Surrender since we first opened, a sweet, elderly woman who always ordered the same thing, a black coffee and a slice of our blueberry pie. "Mrs. Henderson, I don't know what to do," I said, tears welling up in my eyes, blurring my vision. "I feel like I'm losing everything. The bakery, my sanity. I don't recognize myself anymore." Mrs. Henderson patted my hand gently, her wrinkled skin warm and comforting. Now, dear," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You're strong, Sarah. Liam always said you were the backbone of this place. He always said you were the one who kept things running smoothly, the one who remembered everyone's names and their favorite orders. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let that girl, take that away from you." Her words gave me a small measure of comfort, a flicker of hope in the darkness that had enveloped me. But the dread in my gut remained, a heavy weight pressing down on me, a constant reminder that something was deeply wrong, that the nightmare was far from over. I knew I had to do something, to fight back, but I didn't know where to start. I felt so alone, so overwhelmed, so utterly lost. My suspicions grew stronger when I started noticing discrepancies in the bakery's accounts. It was subtle at first, a few missing invoices, a slightly higher than usual expense report, but the more I looked, the more I found. Expenses were soaring, driven by Clara's extravagant orders, but sales were plummeting, as our loyal customers were turned off by the new menu and the increasingly impersonal atmosphere. There were invoices for ingredients I'd never ordered, and payments to suppliers I didn't recognize, names that meant nothing to me. "Clara, have you seen these invoices?" I asked one morning, confronting her in the small office we shared, a cramped space filled with filing cabinets, overflowing bookshelves, and the lingering scent of stale coffee. I spread the papers out on the desk, my hand trembling slightly. Clara barely glanced at the documents, her attention focused on her phone, scrolling through Instagram with a bored expression. "Oh, those? Yeah, I took care of them. Don't worry about it," she said, her voice dismissive, her tone suggesting that I was wasting her time with such trivial matters. "But these are for organic truffle oil and edible gold leaf," I said, incredulous, my voice rising slightly. "We don't use those ingredients, Clara. We've never used those ingredients. What are they for?" "We do now," she said, smirking, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "I'm developing a new line of gourmet pastries. They'll be a huge hit, trust me. You'll see. They'll be all over social media. #sweet surrender gourmet #luxury treats. But we can't afford these things, Clara," I said, my voice rising further, my frustration boiling over. "We're barely breaking even as it is. These extravagant expenses are going to bankrupt us." "Relax, Sarah," she said, waving her hand dismissively, her perfectly polished nails glinting in the fluorescent light. "You worry too much. You need to learn to delegate, to trust me. I know what I'm doing. I have a vision for this place." I didn't believe her. Not for a second. I knew something was going on, something more than just incompetence or misguided enthusiasm. I knew, deep down in my gut, that Clara was up to something, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. That night, fueled by a mixture of anger, suspicion, and a desperate need to protect Liam's legacy, I stayed late at the bakery, long after everyone else had gone home. The streets outside were quiet, the only sounds the occasional passing car and the distant hum of the city. I locked the doors, turned off the lights in the main dining area, and retreated to the office, a small, windowless room that felt both claustrophobic and strangely comforting. I sat down at the computer, Liam's old, battered laptop that still held so many of our shared memories, our plans, our dreams. I opened the accounting software, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands sweating. I started going through the accounts with a fine-tooth comb, poring over every invoice, every receipt, every bank statement, searching for anything that looked out of place, anything that could explain the growing discrepancies I'd been noticing. Hours passed. The only sounds were the hum of the computer, the occasional click of the mouse, and the frantic beating of my own heart. My eyes were burning, my head was throbbing, but I couldn't stop. I had to find something, anything. And then I found it. A series of large, unexplained withdrawals from the bakery's account, made payable to a company I'd never heard of, CC Innovations. The amounts were significant, thousands of dollars each, and they'd been made regularly over the past few weeks, starting just days after Clara had joined the bakery. My blood ran cold. My hands trembled so violently that I could barely hold the mouse. I clicked on the company name, launching a quick online search. The results were immediate and devastating. CC Innovations was registered in Clara's name. The company address was her apartment. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, the air knocked out of my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I could only stare at the screen, at the undeniable proof of my sister's betrayal. Clara was stealing from me. She was stealing from Liam's legacy. She was stealing from our daughter's future. She was systematically dismantling everything we'd worked so hard to build, all for her own selfish gain. The tears came then, hot and angry, blurring my vision, streaming down my face. I sobbed uncontrollably, my body shaking with grief, rage, and a profound sense of betrayal. How could she? How could my own sister do this to me, to us? After what felt like an eternity, the initial shock began to subside, replaced by a cold, hard determination. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and started gathering the evidence. I printed out the bank statements, the invoices, the company registration documents, everything I could find. I needed to be prepared. I needed to be strong. I needed to fight back. I called my lawyer, David Miller, first thing the next morning. I'd known David for years, he'd handled all of Liam's legal work, and he'd always been a trusted advisor and friend. "David, I need your help," I said, my voice shaking, despite my efforts to control it. "I think my sister is embezzling money from my company. And I think she might be trying to sell it." I quickly recounted everything. David listened patiently, his silence punctuated only by the occasional, "I see," or "go on." When I'd finished, there was a long pause. "I'll need to see all the documentation, Sarah," he said, his voice calm but firm, his tone reassuringly professional. "Everything you found. But based on what you're telling me, it sounds like you have a strong case. A very strong case. Embezzlement, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. The list goes on. We can stop her, Sarah. We can protect your company, and your inheritance. Over the next few weeks, David and I worked tirelessly, gathering evidence, building our case, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. We discovered that Clara had not only been embezzling money, but she'd also been secretly negotiating to sell the bakery to a rival company, a large, soulless chain known for its bland, mass-produced pastries, a company that would undoubtedly gut Sweet Surrender, strip it of its charm and character, and turn it into just another cookie-cutter franchise. It was a betrayal of everything Liam and I had stood for. We also uncovered a series of emails between Clara and my parents, emails that revealed the full extent of their complicity. They knew what Clara was doing. They were encouraging her, guiding her, even profiting from her actions. They'd been secretly receiving a portion of the embezzled funds, using it to pay off their own debts, to finance their lavish lifestyle, to support Clara's extravagant spending habits. The discovery of my parents' involvement was the final blow. It was worse than the financial betrayal, worse than the threat to the bakery. It was the realization that the people who were supposed to love me, to protect me, had actively participated in my downfall. It was a wound that I knew would never fully heal. The final confrontation took place in my parents' living room. I'd insisted on having them present, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd show some remorse, some shred of decency, that they'd finally see Clara for who she really was. I was a fool to think so. David Miller was there, too, armed with a stack of incriminating documents, his presence a reassuring symbol of strength and legality. He'd become more than just my lawyer, he was my confidant, my advisor, my shield against the storm. "Mom, Dad, I need to show you something," I said, my voice trembling but firm, my hands clutching the folder containing the evidence so tightly that my knuckles were white. I laid out the evidence, piece by piece, the bank statements with the unexplained withdrawals, the invoices for the phantom ingredients, the company registration documents for CC Innovations, the contract with the rival bakery, the emails between Clara and my parents, detailing their scheme. I presented it all, methodically, deliberately, forcing them to confront the undeniable truth of their betrayal. Clara's face turned pale, then flushed crimson. She started to stammer, to deny, to deflect, but the evidence was overwhelming. My parents looked stunned, disbelieving, their carefully constructed facade of righteous indignation crumbling before my eyes. "Clara, is this true?" my father asked, his voice wavering, his eyes searching her face for some sign of denial, some glimmer of hope that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. Clara didn't answer. She just stared at the floor, her perfectly coiffed hair slightly askew, her expensive designer handbag clutched tightly in her lap, as if it were a lifeline. "She's been stealing from us, Mom, Dad," I said, my voice cracking, tears welling up in my eyes again, but this time, they were tears of anger, not grief. "She's been trying to sell the bakery out from under us, the bakery that Liam and I built with our own two hands, the bakery that was supposed to be our legacy, Olivia's future. And you knew about it. You helped her." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and horror. "That's not true, Sarah. You're twisting things. You're just jealous of Clara's success, of her business acumen." "Success?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "She's a thief, Mom. A liar and a thief. And you've been enabling her all along, encouraging her, protecting her. You've chosen her over me, over your own granddaughter, your own flesh and blood." "Don't you dare speak to your mother like that, young lady," my father said, his face turning red, his voice rising in anger. "You have no right." "I have every right," I shouted, my voice breaking, my control finally snapping. "You've both chosen Clara over me my entire life. You've ignored my needs, dismissed my feelings, belittled my accomplishments, and now you're defending her when she's stealing from me, from Liam's legacy, from Olivia's future. You've betrayed me, you've betrayed Liam, you've betrayed everything we stand for." "That's enough, Sarah," David Miller interjected, his voice calm but firm, his hand resting reassuringly on my arm. "Let me handle this. You don't need to subject yourself to this anymore." He turned to my parents, his expression stern and unwavering. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, I understand this is difficult to accept, but the evidence is overwhelming. Your daughter has committed a serious crime. She could face jail time, significant fines, and a permanent criminal record. And, frankly, your involvement makes you accomplices." My mother started to cry, her carefully applied makeup running down her face, her perfectly coiffed hair falling out of place. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes, his shoulders slumping, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and despair. Clara finally spoke, her voice small and shaky, barely audible above the sound of her mother's sobs. I didn't mean to, she stammered, avoiding my gaze. I wanted to be successful, like Sarah. I wanted to make you proud, to show you that I could be more than just a failure. By stealing from your own sister? I asked, incredulous, my voice dripping with sarcasm. By destroying the business your brother-in-law built, the business that provided for your niece, your own flesh and blood? Is that how you define success, Clara? By destroying other people's lives? Clara didn't answer. She just sobbed, her body shaking with the force of her emotions. In the end, after hours of agonizing negotiations, we reached a settlement. David Miller, with his calm demeanor and sharp legal mind, managed to extract a semblance of justice from the wreckage. Clara agreed to return the stolen money, every penny of it, and she and my parents signed a legally binding agreement promising to stay away from the bakery, from me, and from Olivia, forever. It wasn't the outcome I'd initially wanted. I'd wanted them to be punished, to face the full consequences of their actions, to feel the pain and humiliation they'd inflicted on me, but David convinced me that it was the best option for Olivia, for my own sanity, and for the future of the bakery. The following weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, financial audits, and emotional turmoil. I felt like I was walking through a minefield, every step fraught with danger, every decision carrying enormous weight, but with the help of David Miller, and the unwavering support of my friends and the loyal employees at Sweet Surrender, Mark, Emily, Susan, and the others who had stood by me through thick and thin, I managed to get through it. I fired Clara, of course, stripping her of her ill-gotten title and her undeserved authority. And I haven't spoken to my parents since that day in their living room, that day when the truth came out, when the lies and the betrayals were finally exposed. It's a painful estrangement, a gaping wound in my heart that may never fully heal, but I know it's for the best. I can't have that kind of toxicity in my life, or in Olivia's. I need to protect her, to shield her from the darkness that had consumed my own family. Sweet Surrender is still standing. It's a little battered, a little bruised, scarred by the battle it has endured, but it's still there. And it's slowly, painstakingly, starting to thrive again. I've hired a new manager, a talented young woman named Maria, who shares my passion for baking and my commitment to quality, a woman who understands the importance of hard work, honesty, and integrity. We've revamped the menu, bringing back the classic favorites that our customers loved, the recipes that Liam and I had perfected over the years, while also introducing some new, exciting creations, inspired by our shared love of food and our commitment to innovation. Olivia is doing well, too. She misses her father terribly, of course, and there are days when the grief is overwhelming, when she cries herself to sleep, clutching his old, worn-out baseball glove, the one he used to teach her how to play catch in the backyard. But she's resilient, she's strong, and she's surrounded by love. She often helps me out at the bakery, decorating cupcakes with colorful sprinkles, arranging cookies on platters, and chatting with the customers, her bright smile and infectious laughter filling the space with a warmth that had been missing for too long. She has Liam's smile, his easygoing charm, and his kind heart. I'm not going to lie and say that everything is perfect. It's not. I still have moments of overwhelming grief, of crippling anxiety, of blinding rage. There are days when I wake up with a knot in my stomach, dreading the challenges ahead, when I feel like I can't go on, when I just want to curl up in a ball and disappear. But I force myself to get out of bed, to put one foot in front of the other, to keep moving forward. I do it for Olivia, for Liam's memory, and for myself. And I've learned a valuable lesson, a painful but necessary lesson. Family isn't always about blood. It's not about shared DNA or legal obligations. It's about the people who love you, who support you, who show up when you need them most, who stand by you through thick and thin, who celebrate your successes and comfort you during your failures. It's about the people who choose you, not the ones who are obligated to you by some arbitrary biological connection. And sometimes, you have to choose yourself, even if it means walking away from the people who are supposed to love you the most, even if it means severing ties with the people who share your history, your bloodline, your name. It's a difficult choice, a heartbreaking choice, but sometimes it's the only choice, the only way to protect yourself, to heal, to move forward. And so, I've chosen myself. I've chosen Olivia. I've chosen Sweet Surrender. I've chosen a future free from the toxic influence of my parents and my sister. It's a future that's still uncertain, still filled with challenges, but it's a future that's mine. And that, I realize, is the greatest inheritance Liam could have ever given me. It wasn't about the money, or the properties, or the business. It was about the freedom to choose my own path, to define my own family, to create my own destiny. And I'm determined to make the most of it.